Section 1-2 is on order of operations. To evaluate an expression means to find its value. So for example, if I were to say evaluate 2 to the 4th power, that means you would figure out what value that has. So 2 to the 4th is 2 times 2 times 2 times 2, which is equal to 16. Order of operations is the order in which we do the operations to evaluate an expression. In other words, what do I do first? Do I add first? Do I multiply? Do I do my exponents first? So mathematicians have decided that the order that we're going to do this in is abbreviated as Pemdas. P stands for parentheses or any other grouping symbols, which can also be square brackets, curly braces, or a fraction bar. All of these symbols group things together, and we want to do what's within those grouping symbols first. The E stands for exponents, so we're going to evaluate anything raised to a power. Notice I put M and D together because we're going to do our multiplication and divisions together from left to right. We do not do all of the multiplications, then all the divisions. We do them as they come together from left to right. And the same thing with addition and subtraction. We do those together from left to right. If we follow the order of operations, we'll all get the same answer for evaluating an expression. Let's take a look at several examples here. So the directions say evaluate each expression. So I have 48 divided by 2 to the 3rd power times 3 plus 5. So I have no grouping symbols in this, so there's nothing there. I have an exponent there, so I'm going to have 48 divided by, and I need to evaluate 2 to the 3rd power. That's 2 times 2 times 2, which is 8, times 3 plus 5. Please try to do just one step at a time and show all of your work in steps. Just do one simplification each time. So now we have 48 divided by 8 times 3 plus 5. So I have a division, I have a multiplication, and I have an addition. Pemdas says I need to next do my multiplications and divisions as they come from left to right. So the first is going to be 48 divided by 8, which gives me 6 times 3 plus 5. Now I have a multiplication and an addition, so I need to do my multiplication first, and then adding 5 to that gives me 23. I know it's a little tedious to write out all of the steps, but this is the best way to do it. That way you don't make a simple mistake, and I can follow your work. Example number 2, we have the quantity 8 minus 3 times 3 times the quantity 3 plus 2. So let's evaluate our parentheses first, since those are the grouping symbols we have. 8 minus 3 is 5 times 3, and since the parentheses don't really impact each other, I'm going to do each of those together. 3 plus 2 is 5. Okay. Now notice I used parentheses again. In this case, my parentheses are not grouping symbols because there's no operations within the parentheses, it's just the number. In this case, remember the parentheses mean multiplication. So I basically have 5 times 3 times 5. I'll do my multiplications together as they come from left to right. 5 times 3 is 15 times 5, and 15 times 5 is 75. Example number 3 throws in some square brackets, and don't be scared off by the square brackets. Just think of them as like additional parentheses. So I have 4 times the quantity, 12 divided by the quantity 6 minus 2, and then the whole thing in square brackets is squared. So I need to work from the inside out. I have grouping symbols that are parentheses here and square brackets here. I'm going to start on the inside and deal with what's in the parentheses first. So 6 minus 2 is 4. Okay, so now I have 4 times the quantity 12 divided by 4 squared. So let's continue to work on our grouping symbols. I have 12 divided by 4. So 4 times 3 squared. And if you really don't like those square brackets at this point, you could use parentheses if you want. Now, this is a common mistake that people make. They'll look at this and go, okay, 4 times 3, that's 12, and then square it. But remember, Pemdas says that exponents come before multiplication. So before I can multiply 4 and 3, I have to raise 3 to the power of 2. So this is really going to give me 4 times 3 squared, which is 9, for a final answer of 36. So be careful when there's multiplication and exponents. And our last example asks us to evaluate 2 times the quantity x squared minus y plus z squared if x is equal to 4, y is equal to 3, and z is equal to 2. So before I can use order of operations on this, I need to substitute in the values for x, y, and z. So we'll have 2 times x is 4 squared minus y, which is 3, plus 2 times z, plus z squared, and z is 2 squared. Whenever I do this, I always stop and go back and make sure I plugged in correctly. So I put in 4 for x, 3 for y, and a 2 for z. Now I just do Pemdas on this. Starting with my parentheses, but inside my parentheses I have a power. So I need to evaluate that first. 4 squared is 16. And I can actually kind of combine a step here. Since this 2 squared really doesn't impact what's going on in the first part of the problem, I can go ahead and evaluate that and write it as 4. Now I need to evaluate in the parentheses, so 2 times 16 minus 3 is 13, plus 4. And now I have multiplication and addition, so I have to do my multiplication first, and then I can do my addition. Okay. So this lesson talked about order of operations and using Pemdas. Just make sure, the trickiest thing I think is making sure that you're doing your exponents before you multiply. And in any of these problems where you have to plug in values, please go back and check and make sure that you plugged them in correctly first.